It was 11:42 p.m., August 18th, 2022, in Montego Bay, Jamaica. The security cameras at the Coral Sands Resort caught a couple entering the lobby, laughing, holding hands. She was Denise Porter, 42, a local businesswoman. He was Franklin Moore, 55, an American tourist from Atlanta, Georgia. They had met online 10 months earlier, a long-distance love story born out of late-night messages and pixelated smiles. To the camera, they looked like a couple finally living their dream, but less than 8 hours later, only one of them would walk out of that hotel alive. At 7:23 a.m., Franklin stepped into the same lobby, alone. He looked calm, suitcase in hand, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Denise never checked out. Her body was found later that afternoon, strangled inside room 214. Police said the bed looked almost untouched, no forced entry. No screams heard, just silence and a broken gold necklace beside the bed. The CCTV told the story she never could. And what began as a romantic getaway ended as one of Jamaica's most chilling crimes. He said he loved her, a detective later said, but love doesn't leave fingerprints on someone's throat. How did a simple lie, a woman hiding her baldness behind a wig, spiral into murder? This is the story of Franklin Moore and Denise Porter. A story about deception, pride, and the kind of anger that doesn't cool with age. We welcome you, our awesome supporters. Where are you watching from tonight and what's the time over there? Take a moment to support us by hitting the subscribe button. Like, share, and hype this video to make it go viral. It was early 2022 in Montego Bay, where the sea breeze carried a mix of salt and diesel from the fishing docks. Denise Porter, 42, lived a quiet, hard-working life. She ran a small cosmetics store near Gloucester Avenue, known to locals as Miss D's Beauty Spot. Everyone who knew her described her the same way, soft-spoken, proud, and private. She had built everything she owned with her own hands, from the painted pink walls of her shop to the apartment above it where she lived alone. But behind the bright lipstick and confident smile, Denise hid a secret. Years earlier, she had been diagnosed with alopecia areata, a condition that caused her to lose her hair completely. At first it was small patches, then more, until she woke one morning with clumps on her pillow. For months she cried in silence. Then she learned to live with wigs, makeup, and careful angles in photos. To most people, she looked like the picture of confidence. Online, she became Denise W. from Jamaica. Outgoing, full of laughter, her profile photos always flawless. That's where she met Franklin Moore, a 55-year-old electrical contractor from Atlanta, Georgia. Their first message exchange happened in October 2021. Franklin said he'd always wanted to visit Jamaica. Denise told him about her shop, her long days, and how she hadn't dated seriously in years. He made her laugh. He called her Sunshine. He said her voice made him forget his troubles. Over 10 months, they exchanged thousands of messages. They video called every weekend. Denise always wore her wig, never letting the camera catch her from behind. Franklin said he loved her confidence, that she was a real woman, not like the ones back home. To her friends, Denise spoke of him constantly. Franklin's different, she told one friend. He listens. He makes me feel seen. By the time summer 2022 came around, he was promising to visit. She told her best friend Leona that she was nervous but excited. "What if he doesn't like me in person?" she said. Leona laughed it off. "Girl, if he's still talking to you after 10 months, he's already in love." When Franklin finally booked his flight to Jamaica, Denise began preparing weeks in advance. She bought new dresses, practiced recipes she planned to cook for him, and booked a 2-night stay at Coral Sands Resort to make the weekend special. But something about Franklin didn't quite fit the fairy tale she described. Back in Atlanta, neighbors said he was quiet but short-tempered, divorced twice, mostly kept to himself. He told people he was flying to Jamaica to meet someone serious, but no one really knew her name. When he arrived at Sangster International Airport on August 18th, 2022, Denise waited for him in the arrivals hall. She wore a floral dress, her best wig, and a nervous smile. Franklin spotted her instantly. Witnesses later said they looked happy, hugging, laughing, but there was a stiffness in Franklin's body language, like a man performing affection rather than feeling it. For Denise, it was the beginning of something she thought was love. For Franklin, it was the moment disappointment quietly took root. Franklin Moore checked into Coral Sands Resort at 3:47 p.m. on August 18, 2022. He signed the register with neat block letters, F. Moore, Atlanta, USA. The receptionist remembered him as polite but distant. He barely smiled. Denise had arrived a few minutes earlier. She stood beside him at the counter, chatting nervously, holding her purse tight against her chest. On camera, they looked like any other couple, but up close, Franklin's eyes moved differently. He wasn't looking at her. He was studying her. In the car ride from the airport, she'd laughed and told stories about her shop. Franklin nodded but said little. He kept glancing at her hairline, the edge of her wig shifting slightly in the breeze from the window. She noticed, adjusted it, and smiled. "Too much wind, huh?" He forced a laugh. Inside, a different thought had started to form. Quiet, bitter, growing. He had built a fantasy of Denise. Long, thick hair, radiant and natural. The woman before him wasn't that. And even though he said nothing, resentment crept in like a shadow. At dinner that evening, they sat at Pelican Grill, facing the sea. Denise ordered grilled snapper. Franklin had steak. The waiter recalled Denise talking a lot, smiling, occasionally touching his hand. Franklin listened but didn't meet her eyes often. He asked about her wigs. "So, you wear them all the time?" he said lightly. She hesitated. "Mostly," she replied. "It's easier for me. I lost my hair years ago." He smiled, small, tight. "Oh, you didn't mention that before." She looked down. Didn't think it mattered. Later, when she went to the restroom, Franklin opened his phone and scrolled through their old photos. He zoomed in on her face, stared for a long moment, and then turned off the screen. They went back to the hotel around 9:30 p.m. The CCTV caught them entering the lobby together, laughing faintly. Denise held onto his arm. Franklin's smile looked strained. Inside the room, Denise laid out plans for the next day. A boat tour, maybe Dunn's River Falls. She talked about showing him the market and the beach where she spent her childhood. Franklin listened quietly, then said he was tired from the flight. When she changed into pajamas, she removed her wig. He froze. She looked at him, uncertain. "I don't usually show people this," she said softly. He said nothing for a long time. Then, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Later that night, while she brushed her teeth, Franklin sat on the bed, staring at the wall. Neighbors in the next room later told police they heard muffled voices around 11 p.m. Not shouting, just tense conversation. A man's voice low and cold. A woman's voice trying to explain something. Then silence. At 11:42 p.m., Franklin left the room briefly. The hallway camera showed him going downstairs to the lobby, asking the front desk for more towels. He smiled at the clerk. Calm. He returned to the room with the towels at 11:47 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw Denise alive. It was Saturday night, August 20th, 2022, at the Coral Sands Resort in Montego Bay, Jamaica. The sea outside was calm, the sky dull with thin clouds that hid the stars. Room 214 overlooked the pool, quiet, isolated at the far corner of the hotel. By morning, Franklin Moore and Denise Harris had spent 2 days together. To everyone else, they looked like a couple on vacation. But inside that room, the air was heavy with something unspoken. At 8:32 a.m., Franklin went down to the breakfast buffet alone. He wore a blue shirt, cleanly pressed. Denise joined him 10 minutes later, smiling as if trying to make things normal again. She sat across from him, sipping pineapple juice. "You didn't sleep much," she said softly. He shrugged. "New place, hard to get used to." Denise smiled, though her eyes looked tired. "Maybe today we can just relax by the pool, no tours, no taxis." He nodded but didn't answer. Around them, other guests laughed, ate pancakes, and talked about snorkeling. Franklin kept glancing at his phone. His face was unreadable. Later that day, they walked to the beach nearby. Locals were playing reggae from a speaker under a palm tree. Denise wore a hat to shield her head. Franklin walked a few steps ahead, carrying her sandals. They barely spoke. At 3:14 p.m., he went for a swim. Denise sat under an umbrella, scrolling through her phone. She recorded a short video of the sea, her voice cheerful. In the clip, later found on her phone, she said, "Beautiful day with Franklin. Feels good to finally meet." It was the last recording she ever made. Back in their room around 5:40 p.m., the silence returned. Franklin sat by the window, typing something on his phone. Denise came out of the shower, wearing a towel around her shoulders. She smiled faintly. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded without looking at her. She sat beside him on the bed. "You've been quiet since last night. Did I do something wrong?" Franklin hesitated. "No," he said slowly. "It's just not what I expected." "What do you mean?" He took a breath, still not facing her. "You look different." Denise frowned. "Different how?" He stood up, walked to the table, and poured himself some water. "The pictures, the calls, you didn't mention everything?" Her tone shifted, gentle but hurt. "You mean my hair?" He stayed silent. She sighed. "Franklin, I have alopecia. I thought you knew. I thought—" He interrupted. "You could have told me." "I didn't think it mattered," she said, her voice trembling. "You said you like me for me." He turned sharply. "Yeah, but that's not who you showed me." Denise's eyes welled. "You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to lose my hair?" For a moment, Franklin said nothing. Then quietly, "You lied." That word hit her. She stood up, voice cracking. "I didn't lie. I just wanted you to see me the way everyone else does. Normal." Franklin looked at her, expression cold. "Guess I see the truth now." She went quiet, staring at him as if trying to find the man she had known for months. But he had changed. By 7 p.m., they dressed for dinner. Denise wore a floral dress and her best wig. Franklin wore the same shirt from earlier. They walked to the Driftwood Lounge, a small restaurant by the beach. Witnesses later said they looked tense. During dinner, Denise tried to lighten the mood. She told stories about her nieces, her shop, and how her mother had survived breast cancer. Franklin barely spoke. He kept glancing at the couples around them, then back at her, as if comparing. The waiter remembered him saying only one thing: "I'll have another drink." They left the restaurant around 9:22 p.m. CCTV captured them walking back toward the hotel. Denise leaned slightly toward him, laughing nervously. Franklin's hands were in his pockets. When they reached their room at 9:38 p.m., everything seemed quiet again. Denise poured 2 glasses of wine and turned on the small TV. Franklin sat beside her, scrolling his phone, ignoring the show. She reached for his hand. "I really like you, Franklin. I want this to work." He didn't move. "You can be honest," she continued softly. "If you don't feel the same, I'll understand." He looked at her, a long, steady look. "I just didn't expect this." Denise swallowed hard. "Then maybe you shouldn't have come." She stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains slightly open. Outside, faint reggae echoed from a distant bar. The air smelled like salt and smoke. Franklin stood too. "You made me think you were someone else." She turned. "I'm still me." He shook his head slowly. "No, you're not." The argument grew sharper, not shouting, but tense, clipped words. He accused her of tricking him. She tried to explain, voice cracking. At 10:24 p.m., a guest walking down the hallway heard muffled sounds. A man's voice low and angry, a woman's voice pleading. The sound lasted about 2 minutes, then stopped. In the next half hour, the hallway camera captured Franklin, stepping out once, pacing briefly, then returning to the room. He looked composed, not frantic. At 11:07 p.m., the lights in room 214 went off. No one saw or heard anything else that night. It was the night of August 20th, 2022, in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Room 214, Coral Sands Resort. The air conditioner hummed softly. Outside, waves broke faintly against the shore. At 11:10 p.m., Denise Harris lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her glass of wine sat untouched on the nightstand. The TV played a rerun of Law & Order, the sound low. Franklin Moore sat by the table, phone in hand, scrolling through photos from earlier that day. He wasn't smiling in any of them. Denise turned her head toward him. "You're quiet again," she said softly. He didn't answer. "I said, I'm sorry," she continued, voice trembling a little. "I didn't mean to hide anything." Franklin looked up. His expression was blank. "You didn't hide it?" "I meant, I didn't think it mattered. I've lived with alopecia since I was 23. I thought if you got to know me first, it wouldn't scare you off." Franklin leaned back in the chair. So, you thought lying would make it better? I didn't lie, she whispered. You lied every time we talked, he said quietly, still scrolling. Every time you showed up on video wearing that wig, smiling like it was all real. You made me believe something that wasn't true. She sat up, clutching the blanket around her. It's still me, Franklin. The same person you said you loved. He laughed once, a dry, bitter sound. You think I flew all the way here for this? Denise blinked. For what? He stood and walked to the window. You knew what you were doing. She looked at his back. What is that? Even mean? He didn't respond, just stared out at the pool below, where the last few guests were finishing their drinks. A reggae song floated up faintly. No woman, no cry. At 11:24 p.m., he turned toward her again. His voice was low. You know what people are saying about me back home? That I'm desperate, that I flew across the world for a woman I met online. Denise's voice cracked. You care that much about what people think? It's not about them, he said. It's about me, about being made a fool of. Denise took a slow breath. So you'd rather hurt me than admit you feel humiliated? He walked closer, towering over her now. You tricked me. Franklin, stop, please. But he didn't. At 11:27 p.m., the hotel security camera in the hallway caught faint shadows passing near the door, movement inside the room, shapes crossing in front of the light. No noise carried beyond the walls. Denise tried to stand. I think you should leave, she said, voice shaking. You can get another room if you want. Franklin stared at her, breathing heavy now. I'm not leaving. Then I will, she said, grabbing her purse from the chair. But before she could reach the door, he stepped in front of her. Move, she said quietly. He didn't move. Her hand trembled. Please, Franklin, don't do this. He looked down at her, eyes dull, unfocused. You lied to me, he repeated. She tried to push past him, but he grabbed her wrist. She gasped. Let go! The sound was sharp, echoing faintly off the walls. At 11:29 p.m., the lamp by the bedside fell over, the bulb flickering once before going dark. The TV kept playing, voices murmuring from the show as if mocking them. Denise struggled. You're hurting me, she cried. Franklin's voice was tight. You ruined everything. No, I didn't. Franklin, please. He shoved her back onto the bed. She tried to get up, but he pressed her down. Panic flooded her eyes. Stop, she screamed. Please stop. But his hands were already at her throat. She clawed at his arms, gasping for air. The sound that came out was thin and desperate, a rasp more than a scream. Why did you lie? He whispered. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands hit his shoulders weakly. Why? He repeated. At 11:31 p.m., the struggle ended. The TV still played faintly, a laugh track echoing in the background. Franklin sat there for a long moment, breathing hard, staring at her motionless body. The room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. His chest heaved. He looked at his hands, then at her face. Her wig had slipped off, lying beside her pillow. The reality of what he'd done began to settle in, slowly, like fog creeping into a room. At 11:42 p.m., he stood and paced. His breathing steadied. He opened the bathroom door, stared at the sink, splashed cold water on his face. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't look scared, just empty. He walked back out, found a towel, and began wiping surfaces. Light switches, door handles, the nightstand. He unplugged her phone and slid it under the pillow. He picked up her purse, removed the cash, then left it on the chair. At 12:03 a.m., a camera caught him walking down the hallway toward the ice machine. He carried nothing, moved calmly, and returned to the room a minute later. Inside, he pulled the blanket up to her neck, tucking it neatly under her chin. Then, he turned off the TV, turned off the lamp, and sat down again at the table. He stayed that way for nearly an hour, unmoving. At 1:07 a.m., he took a long breath, stood, and began packing his suitcase. He folded his shirts carefully, placed them inside, zipped the bag, and looked around one last time. He whispered something, maybe to her, maybe to himself. No one ever heard what he said. Then he opened the door, stepped out into the hallway, and quietly closed it behind him. The hallway camera caught him leaving the room at 1:11 a.m. He rolled his suitcase down the corridor, passed the elevator, and disappeared from view. At 1:14 a.m., the elevator camera showed him descending to the lobby. His face was blank. The desk clerk later said he smiled faintly when asked if everything was all right. "Yes," Franklin said. "Just checking out early. Got an early flight." He left the key card on the counter. The clerk nodded and wished him safe travels. At 1:21 a.m., the exterior camera captured him, walking across the driveway, pulling his suitcase toward a waiting taxi. The driver later told police he seemed calm, too calm. "Flight to Miami," Franklin had said. By 1:47 a.m., he was at Sangster International Airport. Security footage placed him at the check-in counter, showing no signs of distress. He boarded a 2:35 a.m. flight bound for Miami, scheduled to connect to his home in Atlanta. Inside room 214, everything was still. The blanket stayed perfectly folded. Denise lay there, silent and alone. The next morning, August 21st, 2022, at 10:05 a.m., housekeeping knocked. No response. The staff assumed the couple was out. It wasn't until 2:30 p.m. that another worker tried again, entered, and froze. The blanket, the pale skin, the stillness, she screamed. Within 10 minutes, local police were on site. They sealed the room, questioned staff, and pulled surveillance footage. When they played the lobby camera, one detail stood out immediately. Denise entering the hotel with Franklin the previous evening, smiling beside him. Then, hours later, the same man walking out alone. No panic, no calls for help, just silence and an early checkout. By 6 p.m., a global alert had already been issued. Franklin Moore, 55 years old, American national, last seen leaving Coral Sands Resort at 1:14 a.m., but he never made it home. Somewhere between Jamaica and Florida, 2 hours into the flight, a medical emergency was to reported. A man had collapsed in the aisle, sweating, short of breath. The plane diverted to the Cayman Islands for emergency landing. When airport medics boarded, they found him conscious but agitated. The name on the passport, Franklin Moore. By the time the local authorities ran his name through the system, the alert from Jamaica had already hit their database. He never boarded another flight. Within 12 hours, Franklin was in handcuffs. The sun was high over Montego Bay when police sealed off the entrance to Coral Sands Resort. It was August 21st, 2022, at 3:08 p.m. Tourists lingered near the pool, phones out, whispering. The sound of waves mixed with police radios and distant sirens. Detective Leroy Dawson, 42, adjusted his sunglasses and stepped into room 214. The air smelled faintly of perfume and disinfectant. The curtains were drawn. Denise Harris lay on the bed, still under the blanket, as if she had just fallen asleep. Her wig rested on the pillow beside her head. Dawson spoke quietly to the forensic tech beside him. "No sign of struggle?" The tech shook his head. "No blood, no forced entry. Room key card was used at 11:26 p.m., then again at 1:11 a.m. Same card." "Same card," Dawson repeated. "Belongs to the boyfriend?" the tech added. Dawson nodded slowly. "American?" "Yeah, Franklin Moore. Checked in with her 2 days ago." The detective studied the room, wine glasses, a half-empty bottle of Merlot, 2 cell phones, one under the pillow. No signs of a robbery, just the quiet echo of something that used to be love. Outside, the sound of the ocean was steady and soft. At 4:22 p.m., the coroner arrived. Denise was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial observations suggested strangulation, no ligature marks, likely manual. Dawson stepped into the hallway, jaw clenched. "Pull all surveillance from last night, every angle, lobby, elevator, hallway." By 5:15 p.m., footage began to load on a laptop in the resort's small security room. The grainy clips played one after another. 11:10 p.m., Denise and Franklin entering the room, laughing softly. 1:11 a.m., Franklin walking out alone, suitcase rolling behind him. The lobby clip showed him smiling faintly at the clerk, calm, too calm. Dawson leaned closer. "Zoom in." The operator paused the frame. Franklin's expression was unreadable, eyes flat, mouth pressed into a thin line. "Get me immigration," Dawson said quietly. "He's not on this island anymore." Across the Caribbean, in Grand Cayman, the emergency diversion had just unfolded. The The Cayman Airport police held Franklin Moore in a small, gray-walled office beside the runway. He sat with his hands cuffed, head down. An officer entered. "Sir, Jamaica police requested you be detained. There's been a homicide." Franklin looked up, face pale. "What? That's crazy. I didn't do anything." "You were the last person seen with the victim." "I left her sleeping," he said. "She was fine when I left." The officer studied him. "You left the island early, without checking out properly." "I told the desk clerk I had a flight," Franklin snapped. "You can ask him yourself." The officer didn't reply, just wrote something in his notebook. At 8:45 p.m., news broke in Montego Bay. Local headlines flashed across TV screens. "American tourist sought in death of woman at luxury hotel." By nightfall, the story had spread across social media. Photos of Denise smiling on the beach just days before. Comments pouring in. People asking how something like that could happen. At the Coral Sands bar, a bartender shook his head. "They seemed happy," he told a reporter. "She was sweet, talked about maybe getting married someday." At 9:22 p.m., Dawson received confirmation. Franklin Moore was in custody. He exhaled deeply, the weight of the day finally catching up to him. "Tell Cayman to hold him. We'll send the extradition paperwork by morning." Back in the small apartment Denise had shared with her sister in Kingston, the phone rang at 10:47 p.m. Her sister, Maria, answered half asleep. "Ms. Harris, this is Detective Dawson, Montego Bay Police." The pause that followed was long and heavy. Maria's voice broke. "Is she—" "I'm sorry," Dawson said softly. "There's been an incident. We believe she was killed last night." Maria let out a choked sound. No, that's not possible. She said she was happy. She said he was the one." The detective said nothing. There were no words that could fix that kind of grief. When she hung up, Maria stared at the wall for a long time, the phone still in her hand. Meanwhile, at the Cayman Islands Police Detention Center, Franklin sat alone in the holding cell. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. He kept telling himself it wasn't his fault. "She lied," he whispered under his breath. "She lied first." But the words sounded hollow. The next morning, August 22, 2022, Jamaican detectives flew in to question him. Dawson entered the interrogation room with 2 officers. He placed a folder on the table. "Franklin, we've reviewed the footage," Dawson began. "You were the last person to see Denise alive." "I didn't touch her," Franklin said. "Then how do you explain the bruises on her neck?" Franklin looked away. "She was fine when I left." Dawson slid a photo across the table. Denise, smiling by the ocean, alive. She trusted you, flew you here, spent 10 months believing you cared about her. Franklin's jaw tightened. "Why'd you leave at 1 in the morning?" He didn't answer. "Why'd you wipe down the room?" Franklin's voice dropped. "I panicked." Dawson leaned forward. "Panicked or planned?" Silence. The detective's tone softened. "You know, most people who do terrible things don't mean to, but they lie about it, and that's what makes them monsters." Franklin finally met his gaze. "She lied to me first," he whispered. Dawson closed the file. "You strangled her because she was bald?" Franklin flinched. "You wouldn't understand." "No," Dawson said. "I don't think anyone ever will." By August 23rd, Franklin Moore was officially charged in connection with the death of Denise Harris. He was extradited back to Jamaica under supervision of local and British authorities. The flight landed at 2:14 p.m. He was led down the tarmac in handcuffs, head low, cameras flashing. News anchors narrated over the footage later that evening. A 55-year-old American man is now facing murder charges in Jamaica, accused of killing his online girlfriend after discovering she was bald. Authorities described the act as one of pure cruelty. In the background, the hotel's bright blue sign gleamed in the sun. Coral Sands Resort, where everything had gone wrong. At 9 p.m. in Kingston, Maria lit a candle by a framed photo of Denise. The flame flickered softly. She whispered a prayer no one could hear. On the screen, the news anchor's voice continued. Police say the suspect showed no visible remorse. And in the cell that night, Franklin sat with his head against the wall, staring into the dark. His hands, the same ones that had once held hers, now trembled slightly. He whispered the same words again and again, the only words he could find. She lied. But the echo came back empty, August 23, 2022, Montego Bay, Jamaica. 3:15 p.m. Rain streaked the windows of Sangster International Airport as police escorted Franklin Moore, 55, off a redirected flight. He had been detained after the death of Denise Porter, a 42-year-old Jamaican woman found strangled inside her hotel room at Coral Sands Resort 2 days earlier. Local officers from the Major Crimes Unit moved quietly, avoiding eye contact with reporters who had gathered near the arrival gate. Moore said nothing, his face drained and stiff. He was taken straight to police headquarters in Montego Bay for questioning. At headquarters the following morning, investigators reviewed the chain of evidence. Surveillance footage showed both entering the hotel around 8:47 p.m., laughing and holding hands. Just after 1:10 a.m., the same camera captured only Franklin leaving, wearing a cap and moving quickly through the lobby. When detectives asked about that night, he claimed Denise had fallen asleep first and that he had dozed off on the couch. In his version, he woke hours later to find her unresponsive, panicked, and left the hotel before sunrise. His voice stayed calm, measured, almost detached, but the physical evidence started to unravel the story. August 25th, Forensic Lab, Kingston. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death. Manual strangulation. Bruises circled the front of Denise's neck, and there were tiny burst blood vessels in both eyes, unmistakable indicators of pressure. Under her fingernails, trace DNA matched Franklin. A broken shirt button found on the bedroom carpet also linked to his clothing. The lab's conclusion left little room for doubt. Back at the resort, crime scene technicians processed room 209 again. The space looked suspiciously neat. Sheets had been stripped, the phone wiped clean. Yet a faint palm print was lifted from the glass table near the bed. Inside the bathroom bin was a handful of used tissues covered in makeup and strands of synthetic hair. Nearby, a blonde wig lay tangled on the floor, its lining labeled Custom Lace, Miami. Investigators believed Denise had removed it before the argument that turned deadly. August 26th, digital forensic specialists examined Franklin's phone and laptop. Deleted searches reappeared through forensic recovery. Flights from Montego Bay to Miami. August 21st early morning. How to delete hotel CCTV footage, signs of female hair loss, and alopecia. Those discoveries shifted the motive sharply. It wasn't theft. It wasn't an accident. It was resentment. A bruised ego turned violent after discovering something he could not accept. Witness interviews painted a similar picture. The bartender on duty remembered them dining by the water that evening. Denise had seemed thrilled, ordering wine, smiling between photos. Franklin stayed quiet, drinking heavily. The waiter noticed his mood darken as the night went on. Staff at the reception desk recalled Denise's laugh echoing down the hallway as they returned to their room. She was excited, telling them it was the best night of her life. No one saw her alive again. By August 29th, the investigation had a clear timeline. Both arrived at the hotel before sunset. They dined together, drank for hours, and went upstairs. Around 1 a.m., Denise was dead. At 1:11 a.m., Franklin walked out alone. He booked a taxi to the airport and boarded a flight before dawn. His attempt to leave the country nearly succeeded, until a medical emergency forced the plane to make an unscheduled landing in the Cayman Islands, where he was detained. When the Jamaican police received word of his location, an extradition request followed within hours. Detectives compiled their findings into a case file. Victim: Denise Porter, 42. Suspect: Franklin Moore, 55. Motive: emotional rejection and deception tied to physical appearance, cause of death: strangulation. Key evidence: DNA under fingernails, CCTV footage, phone search history, flight booking. Inside the report, a handwritten note by one of the investigators read, "He cleaned the room, but not his conscience. Everything else, the cameras saw." September 1st, Montego Bay Police Headquarters. When shown the autopsy report, Franklin broke the silence. He said Denise had lied to him about her looks, that she wasn't the woman she pretended to be. The tone wasn't grief, it was humiliation. Investigators noted how his anger resurfaced whenever her wig or alopecia was mentioned. He eventually admitted they argued. He described her removing her wig before bed and teasing him for being quiet all night. He claimed he only meant to push her away, but things got out of hand. There was no remorse, just justification. September 3rd, police press briefing. The Jamaica Constabulary Force announced formal charges for murder. Detectives confirmed the forensic consistency between Franklin's DNA and the evidence at the scene. They also mentioned coordination with U.S. authorities, since the suspect was an American citizen. Local news carried images of Denise, smiling in photos taken weeks before her death, wearing bright dresses, her confidence unmistakable. Friends described her as kind, funny, always trying to see the good in people. In Montego Bay, the story dominated headlines. Many viewers expressed shock that a relationship that began online ended with such quiet brutality. As the days passed, Franklin remained in custody awaiting trial. The evidence was overwhelming, but investigators continued building the digital timeline: emails, text exchanges, and months of video calls. One text stood out, sent by Denise just hours before she died. "I can't believe this is real. Tomorrow we'll have breakfast together. No screens between us." For detectives, that single line captured the heart of the case. A woman chasing love in a digital world, and a man unable to face his own expectations. Outside the station, the Caribbean sun returned, bright and steady over the coast. Inside, the file marked homicide. Coral Sands closed with a signature and a quiet exhale. The case was now ready for court. May 10th, 2023, Montego Bay, Parish Court, Jamaica, 9:32 a.m. The courtroom was small, humid, and tense. Ceiling fans rotated lazily, doing little to move the heavy Caribbean air. Reporters filled the back row. On the front bench sat the family of Denise Porter, her sister, 2 cousins, and a quiet woman from her church. Their eyes never left the man seated across the room. Franklin Moore, dressed in a pale blue shirt and khaki trousers, looked thinner than in his booking photos. His face stayed blank, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He refused to meet anyone's gaze. The judge entered. The murmurs stopped. The charge was read clearly. The unlawful killing of Denise Porter on the night of August 21st, 2022, at the Coral Sands Resort, Montego Bay. Franklin stood. "Not guilty," he said softly. The prosecution opened with a single photo, Denise smiling by the ocean, taken days before her death. The prosecutor, Karen Matthews, spoke slowly, letting her words echo. She met him online. For 10 months, she believed he was her future. On August 21st, she believed she was meeting the man she loved. Within hours, she was dead. She paused, holding the silence long enough for the sound of the ceiling fan to fill the room. His fingerprints were on her neck, his DNA under her nails. He cleaned the room, deleted his searches, booked an early flight, and left her body behind. The CCTV footage played on a projector, grainy but clear. At 8:47 p.m., both entered the hotel lobby. Denise waved at the front desk clerk. Franklin followed, unsmiling. At 1:10 a.m., the same camera showed Franklin alone, walking fast, glancing once toward the elevator before disappearing outside. The clerk who had checked them in testified. He said Denise looked happy, like someone who waited a long time for this. He also remembered Franklin's expression, tense, like something wasn't right. Then came the forensic pathologist. Calm, clinical, unshaken by the flashbulbs. She explained how the marks around the victim's throat showed sustained pressure. Not an accident, not a momentary outburst. Strangulation takes time, she said. It is a deliberate act. The jurors didn't look away. When it was the defense's turn, the attorney leaned into the podium, voice low and steady. "My client did not murder this woman. He panicked. He found her unresponsive and made terrible choices, yes. But murder requires intent." He suggested Denise might have collapsed during an argument, that Franklin's attempt to help left trace DNA. He called him a lonely, naive man manipulated online by a woman who wasn't honest about who she was. The words made Denise's sister shake her head slowly, tears gathering at the corner of her eyes. Denise's cousin, Simone, took the stand next. She spoke of Denise's excitement, the new clothes she bought, how she practiced smiling on video calls. She read the last text Denise sent her that evening. "He's here. He's real. I'm so happy I could cry." The courtroom fell silent again. Even the fans seemed to slow. Then came the bartender from Coral Sands. He described how Franklin barely spoke at dinner, how Denise kept trying to lighten the mood. She was laughing, he said quietly. He wasn't. Detectives testified about the phone searches, how to delete hotel CCTV footage, flights from Montego Bay to Miami early morning, and signs of female hair loss. On the screen, a series of recovered texts filled the wall, months of conversations between the two. Her messages glowed with warmth and patience. His replies, shorter, colder as the months went on. The prosecutor pointed to the final exchange, sent hours before the killing. Denise: "Tomorrow, breakfast together. No screen between us." Franklin: "We'll see how it goes." That message time-stamped at 6:14 p.m., August 21st. When Franklin finally took the stand, the room leaned in. He spoke calmly, his voice level, as if describing something that happened to someone else. He said Denise had misled him, that she had lied for months, and that he'd lost control after too much to drink. He insisted he never meant to kill her. "It happened fast," he said. "I didn't even realize she'd stopped breathing." The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. "You strangled her for 40 seconds. That's not fast, Mr. Moore." He didn't respond. He just looked down, tracing the edge of the witness box with his finger. By June 12, 2023, the trial reached its final day. The prosecution called it what it was: a crime of pride. She took off her wig, and in that moment, he saw not deception, but difference, and instead of compassion, he chose violence. The defense argued diminished responsibility, emotional distress, lack of intent, but the evidence, the timeline, the digital trail, all pointed one way. Before the jury withdrew, the judge's voice filled the room. "You must decide if this was a moment of panic or a deliberate act of cruelty." June 14, 2023, 4:57 p.m. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman rose. "We find the defendant, Franklin Moore, guilty of murder." Gasps echoed softly through the gallery. Franklin blinked once, then looked at the floor. He showed no tears, no anger, only the blank expression of a man who already knew what the verdict would be. The judge's words followed a few minutes later. "For the deliberate and conscious killing of Denise Porter, this court sentences you to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 35 years before parole eligibility." Denise's sister wept quietly. The sound of her sobs filled the space the way the silence had filled it before. Outside, the crowd had gathered. Cameras rolled. Reporters shouted questions. None were answered. Police led Franklin into the waiting van. The door closed with a dull metallic thud. Inside the courtroom, the judge remained seated, eyes lowered. Another file closed. Another life gone. Another left behind. At the back, Simone whispered to no one in particular, "She just wanted to be loved." The trial was over, but the story wasn't. The island buzzed with the shock of what had happened. An American man traveling thousands of miles for romance, and a woman who never saw the danger in his silence. The cameras would soon fade, but the lessons and the grief would stay. June 20th, 2023, Montego Bay, Jamaica. 6:42 a.m. The sun rose slowly over the harbor, throwing soft orange light across the courthouse steps. By then, the crowd was gone. The journalists had flown home, the camera crews packed up. What was left was silence, and the weight of what remained behind. In the small cemetery off Albion Road, a grave bore a new headstone. Denise Porter, 1984-2022, loved, missed, believed. Her sister Simone came every morning before work. She never said much. She'd bring fresh hibiscus flowers, wipe away the dust, and sit for a while. Some mornings, she'd whisper things she didn't tell anyone else. About the recipes Denise used to try, the way she laughed when she got nervous, the dreams she had about starting a small cafe near the beach. Simone didn't come for answers anymore, just quiet. In the months after the trial, the story of Denise Porter spread far beyond Jamaica. American news outlets ran the headline for weeks. Online romance ends in murder. Her photo, a bright smile framed by beach light, became the image of another cautionary tale. But in Montego Bay, people spoke of her differently. Locals remembered her as the woman who greeted everyone at the market, who shared sunscreen with tourists, who carried herself with warmth. The hotel staff at Coral Sands Resort still lowered their voices when they spoke about that night. Room 308 remained closed for months before being renovated, the number replaced entirely. Some said the air in that hallway still felt heavy. In July 2023, lawyers from both countries finalized the extradition agreements. The U.S. declined to intervene. Jamaica's courts, following British law, had full jurisdiction since the crime occurred on the island. Franklin was transferred from Montego Bay lockup to the Tower Street Adult Correctional Center in Kingston, a stone fortress built decades ago, where the tropical heat and iron bars made the days endless. His cell was small, with one window facing a concrete wall. Inmates said he kept to himself. He read constantly, mostly old magazines and a Bible he found in the prison library. He didn't speak much, not to guards, not to other inmates, not even to the chaplain who came weekly. One officer remembered asking him, "Do you regret it?" Franklin only said, "She wasn't supposed to lie." Nothing more. Back in the U.S., where Franklin had lived in Ohio, the reaction was split. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, the kind of man who mowed his lawn early and waved at everyone. No one suspected he could kill someone. Old friends from social media left confused comments under news posts. He used to share church quotes. "I can't believe it. That poor woman." A Reddit thread titled "The Jamaican Hotel Murder" gained hundreds of comments dissecting the case. Some blamed online dating, some blamed alcohol, others said it was pride. A man unable to accept being deceived. But beneath the speculation was something quieter. Fear. Fear of what people hide behind screens. Fear of how fast trust can turn to danger. In October 2023, Simone launched a small foundation in Denise's name, the Porter Trust for Digital Safety. It wasn't grand. Just a website and a handful of volunteers, teaching people how to verify online identities, how to protect themselves from manipulation. She spoke on local radio stations, soft-spoken but steady. Denise didn't die because she was foolish, she said once. She died because she believed in someone who lied. There's a difference. Her words struck a chord. Schools invited her to speak. News outlets quoted her. And little by little, the story began to change shape, from tragedy to cautionary lesson. By late 2024, Franklin's health began to fail. Stress, poor diet, and isolation wore him down. He spent most days in the infirmary, staring through the bars at the patch of sky he could see from his bed. No family ever visited, no lawyer came after sentencing. He received one letter, a short one, from a local pastor who had followed the case. It read, "There is forgiveness even for those who break hearts and hands." He never wrote back. Prison records showed he rarely spoke. He had become, as one guard put it, a shadow in plain sight. By 2025, interest in the case faded. True crime podcasts covered it once or twice, then moved on. Streaming channels replayed brief documentaries using Denise's smiling photo, soft background music, and the same closing line. Love turned fatal under the Caribbean sun. But for those who knew her, the church choir, her co-workers, her mother, the story was never entertainment. It was the thing that stole her from them. Her church still left one pew empty on anniversaries. A small plaque at the back of the room read, "In memory of Denise, who trusted love too deeply." In interviews, prosecutors later said the case changed how local law enforcement handled international dating-related crimes. Interpol partnerships strengthened. Hotels in Montego Bay began stricter guest ID policies. Even travel agencies updated warnings about verifying online relationships. But no law could undo what happened in room 308. One officer who worked the case said, years later, "She looked so happy walking in. You could see it on her face. And he looked like someone who'd already decided something." In April 2025, a short documentary aired on Netflix titled The Promise and the Lie. It ran just 48 minutes. The final scene showed Simone at her sister's grave, reading softly from a folded piece of paper. "You told me once that love can't be proven, only shown. I hope, wherever you are, you finally found it shown right." The camera lingered on her hand, resting on the headstone. In the background, waves crashed faintly against the shore. The same sound Denise once said helped her sleep. Then, the screen faded to black. Some stories don't end in lessons, they end in silence, the kind that lingers after words fail. Denise Porter believed in love the way people believe in sunrise, certain it would appear, no matter how long the night. But sometimes faith meets the wrong heart, and what's left behind isn't just tragedy, it's warning carved in stone.